Welcome to another Coffee with Samso. Today we are at Samso HQ down at the EWA Club here in Crawley on the campus of the University of Western Australia. Today we have OD6 metals coming in to talk to us. We will have Brett Hazelden and Darren Holden talking about their new acquisition, the Quinn Fluorspar Project in Nevada. It looks like it's a new direction, but could this be a opportunistic project that's come up and they've grabbed it with both hands to play on the US critical mineral supply? There is lots of companies heading over to the US to take advantage of the opportunity there. So let's sit back and get Brett and Darren to run us through on the business and the geology and mineralization. So thank you. Welcome back to another Coffee with Samso. As I said in the introduction, we've got OD6 metals here with us today, and we're going to get Brett Hazelden and Darren Holden to kind of walk us through their new acquisition. So, Brett, welcome back.
Thanks for having us again.
Welcome to Coffee with Samso, Darren.
Thanks, Noel.
Look, Brett, it's a big acquisition in some form because it's kind of like moved away from where you guys are. So can you just walk us through the thinking behind it and everything else?
Yep, so we've still got rare earths as one of our sort of main pillars of the company going forward. That's still working through the ANSTO process, etc. We have still our Gulf Creek copper project in New South Wales. We're looking at doing some follow-up drilling, so they're still there, but our main pickup now is the Quinn Fluorspar Project in the US, which is in Nevada. So we were looking around, we had a different approach from two different people that sort of introduced the project to us. The project itself being a critical mineral, it was listed by Trump in his first term as a critical mineral. It's used in AI, nuclear, refrigerants, you name it, all sorts of different things, batteries, you name it. So from that point of view, it ticks all the boxes. It's in the US, there's 100% import reliance currently as well in the US as well. 60% of it's produced in China, so from a point of view it ticks all the macro themes. US needs it, it's also used in defence, so perfect little project play for us.
I mean, I just did a Samso News coverage on you guys, and I mean it's quite obvious that it is a step change to get into that US supply chain, which what you've mentioned. It is not a sort of a secret now. It's actually quite a good move in terms of getting exposure in market, which is what the business is all about. Flourspar is a bit new to me and definitely to the Samso platform. So Darren, do you want to give us the ins and outs and express your genius on the project?
Thank you for the coffee. So fluorspar is a really simple mineral. It's also called fluorite, so it's exactly the same. The terms are interchangeable. It's CaF2, so it's calcium fluoride, basically. It looks like this. It's purple. It's non-toxic in its mineral form, and it's the only source in the world for fluorine, for making hydrofluoric acid and all the things that Brett was just talking about. It can form in veins, it can form in granites. Our project is an epithermal project in terms of replacement style, which we can talk about in a bit. But it's pretty straightforward. It's a little heavy, so you can float it. So it's density of around about 2.93 grams per cubic centimeter. So it can come out in a flotation kind of thing. Dead easy to process, and if you've got enough of it at good grades, then it will make some money.
So in terms of grades, like obviously one of the key aspects for everyone is trying to understand when you put your results out, like, can you just give us an idea what we should be looking for and the styles? I think there is an importance of styles of your system as well.
So we've got a cluster of about 8 or 9 historic fluorspar occurrences. 2 of them have been quite well studied. One of them was actually a small mine that produced 26,000 or so tons, around about 45% CaF2, about 45% fluorspar. The other one has got that's called the Horseshoe deposit. The Mammoth deposit is about 40 to 60 meters wide, exposed at surface, extends over several hundred meters along strike as a dipping replacement body, and at surface the grades there are around about 45% also. So what is 45% good? Well, if you look at TVN on the ASX, got the Quinn Project up in the Kimberley. They recently released feasibility. It was a feasibility, wasn't it? They recently released feasibility. Shows a head grade around about 13%, 13 or to 15% or so in there. So we're looking at projects that are maybe 3 to 4 times higher grade than those. Obviously, they're more advanced. They've got more drilling and all this kind of information. We've got to build that up. But we're looking at potentially substantial widths of fluorspar, 40 to 60 meter kind of widths in zones that have got appreciable strike length to them that are running this plus 40 to 50% and possibly even more. There's a number of high grade occurrences nearby as well, such as the Big Jim and Spar occurrences, which are vein style. And here's a piece of Big Jim here. It's running about 94-95% CAF2, 95% fluorspar. So that is we think that as an area that was sort of looked at and mined back in the 50s and 60s and everyone's forgotten about it, we think it's a great pickup, particularly for grade. Location, being in eastern Nevada, close to roads, close to roads, close to highways and the whole infrastructure network of the US, plus with excellent geological factors to it.
So if we look at general as well, so going back globally, we've done some benchmarking. So generally when you look at it, there's vein style projects which you can get small 1 metre wide veins, but they're generally up to 1 million tonnes. So they're not very big, they're higher grades, they're seen around the world, the economics they struggle. You sort of need to be processing about 100,000 tonnes per annum to make these things economic. So you really need something bigger. So that's where Darren was mentioning the replacement style limestones. So they suddenly go from 5 million tonnes to 40 million tonnes around the world. So you see a lot of those, their grades will drop to somewhere between 30 to 60%. That's where the bulk of the mines sit at the moment. And then you've got the next step down, which is it's a contributing factor with other metals in there, for example. So it might have hundreds of millions of tonnes, but it might be a couple of % fluorine in there as well. So those are the 3 styles. Most of the economic ones are obviously what we're looking at the moment, but there are other smaller veiny type shows around the place.
So in terms of a layman thinking here, a replacement style is, you're talking about bulk tonnage kind of system, as opposed to veins being narrow. Yeah, that's fair?
That's fair, yeah.
And it's replacement style in beds of limestone in our case. So you get hot, acidic epithermal fluids. Everyone knows that limestone reacts. It dissolves with acid. So as the hot, acidic epithermal fluids around about 30 million years ago came into the system, it brought fluorine with it. It dissolved the calcium carbonate in the limestone. The calcium went into the fluorine and deposited it, and it forms in essentially parallel with the bedding or in breccia pipes, replacing the limestone in the system. That's where you get the volume coming in. It's not like a little vein opening up, but it's actually a decent scale kind of system coming on that.
Kind of like the tungsten story also. The sort of low, in tungsten it's kind of a lower grade bulk tonnage is the economical mineable stuff, in my opinion, as opposed to the more nuggety effect that occurs in veins. In terms of mining, I mean, or processing or getting to your end product, which is what everyone's trying to do, is there a complexity in terms of the mining, the processing, and the end product?
So it's not complex at the moment, no. So historically, what's been happening, this was sticking out the side, so it was an open pit on the side of the hill. There's underground mines that you'll see which will chase the higher grade areas, but effectively it's a standard crush it, grind it down to a fine flotation type size, which is about 200 micron, and then run it through a flotation circuit. If you've got impurities in there like arsenic or sulfides, you'll float them off first, but then you virtually just float your CAF2, and then that goes into a final product. Generally there's 2 to 3 types of product that people are looking for. They're called an acid spar, ceramic spar, which they don't really talk about too much, or a met spar. So a met spar is a lower grade, but it goes into, it's a lump. It's a bit like iron ore to some extent, so it'll go into iron ore or steel manufactories, etc. like that. So you get depending on what type of grade it is and what impurity it is, you can get a good price for that, around $500 to $650 a tonne. But then you can take it up to the next step if you crush it and grind it down to an acid spar. The acid spar is what's used to go into fluorine gases or hydrofluoric acid or any of the main future-facing activities going forward. So that needs to be 97% pure CaF2, a little bit of silica, a little bit of carbonates and other things, but it has to be really pure in terms of low arsenic. So if you look around the world, Mexico, for example, is a large importer into the US. They've got high arsenic and they can't be used in all the industries.
Okay. And I'll throw this one in. When you guys look at your project, and I know you're in early stages and things like that, and you know, if you use the terminology, what's the exploration target that you think you could have? And I will say it again, you know, it's very early days and you're probably just sifting through all the data, but what potential could this be, conservatively, in terms of size for you guys?
So,
Go ahead, Brett.
So I think if you look at the way we've structured the deal, so we've structured a deal where we've paid $75,000 up front, and then there's progressive milestones all the way through. Some of those milestones have been set at 2 million tonnes at a grade above 30%. So historically, you would suspect that there was historic resource around that number that people easily go find publicly. So we tick that box, the vendors get that money. Where we're trying to get the next step up to is 5 million tonnes at 30% CaF2 and greater than 70% recovery. And again, that's a milestone that we put out to the public as well. So it needs to be 5 million tonnes plus to be economic is where we see it, and we wouldn't have obviously gone into the deal if we didn't think we could see more than 5 million tonnes.
Okay. That's fair. And what is the dollar value that we're thinking of? Because it's again, it's one thing trying to figure out what's a good grade and what's economical, and then what is the, you know, the dollar value if you got there conservatively.
So $650 a tonne is what's going on at the moment, roughly, depending on where you are in the world. There's different prices for Mexico versus Europe versus Asia. So that gives you a sort of a starting point of where that number sits. If you look at 100,000 tonnes per annum, which is where most of the existing production facilities are, they're producing between 100 and 150,000 tonnes per annum. That gives you a bit of a revenue factor that you can work on. We've been doing some benchmarking to see what the costs are in terms of both production costs and others. And the production costs, from what we've seen, vary between about $100 to $200 US a tonne to produce. So the margin looks good just from that point of view there. If you look at, say, Tavan, which we mentioned earlier, they put out a capital cost estimate for the Speewah project in Kimberley in Western Australia. They're talking about $300 million Australian dollars, so about 200 million US. And their operating cost was on the higher end, but there's big demand from as well. The other interesting thing when you look at it as well, and looking at the Tavan case, they've had Sumitomo and Jogmec become partners in that project. So Speewah's been sitting around for 30 or 40 years. It's not a new project, but the Japanese and the Asian in general is looking for the market demand now. So they're looking to get supplies and secure supplies. So we don't see them as a competitor. They're the only other ASX listed company with a Flourspar project. We're in the US, we're targeting the US market, they can target the Asian market, and there's plenty of money for everyone.
Is there a big market? Like, I mean, you mentioned, you know, they're targeting Asian, you're targeting North American. Is there a big market for...
So the market's about 8 million tonnes per annum across the whole global market. Most of it's coming out of China, as we mentioned, so about 60 to 70% out of China. Mongolia is about second, and again, most of it's going into China. China was a net exporter, but now they're a net importer, mostly from Mongolia. So the dynamics have changed as to how that's all going, and it's also based on what the uses are going forward. Mexico's the third biggest producer, and then after that, they're 1 or 2% from South Africa, Vietnam, and other places in the world.
And geologically, are we going to be able to see somebody finding, you know, another Flourspar deposit somewhere that kind of like dampen the market enthusiasm? Is it something that is in the mix of geology that allows that to happen?
For epithermal fluorspar deposits, the biggest in the world will be on the order of 40 million tonnes sort of scale, maybe a little more. But a lot of these have been mined over the years as well. And there's depletion. The future, the growth in the market is looking like it'll be quite strong and projected, particularly with battery technologies, nuclear fuels industries, defence and aerospace technologies. So the future-facing aspect, as Brett mentioned, looks like it's going to be quite strong. Could somebody come out with a brand new discovery that's going to, well, you never know, but maybe that's going to be us.
Well, could be.
We've got extremely strong grades in these projects and some scale to it.
And I think the world will actually need more projects to come on board. So maybe we talk about demand and where those drivers are coming from for a second. If you look at batteries, for example, if you go to a lithium-ion battery, everyone thinks it's lithium, but the chemistry of it is LiPF6. So you've got 6 fluorines going into that battery. So the world's been consuming fluorine busily going into batteries. If you go into nuclear fuel rods, you'll take your yellow cake. If you want to convert your yellow cake to a nuclear fuel rod, you actually need to turn it into uranium hexafluoride, so UF6, to be able to get to a nuclear fuel rod along the steps. So you can't get there without doing that in the centrifuges and everything else. If you look at your refrigerants, there's all the fluoro gases that are going into there as well. If you look at your AI chips and all those, so for all the chips there, all the wafer etching is done with under gas using fluorine and other ones as well, and all the cleaning's also done through there as well. So the demand from the future facing that Darren was mentioning earlier is just growing, and the need in the US, they offshored most of their supply or into China and other places where it was cheaper, but now the world's changed and we've got to have it in place in America nowadays. You've got Tesla there, you've got all the onshoring of the new CHIPS Act, so there's about a $50 billion CHIPS Act in the US that's sucking up lots more money and trying to get all these things positioned in America rather than overseas.
I think timing in some ways is almost perfect. Is now that there's a need for nationalism in terms of project, right? It's kind of like we went from that to no nationalism and let's do it somewhere else, but now it's kind of like back in the yard. But it's always good to have a chemist, isn't it, Darren? You can explain all the chemistry stuff. That's amazing.
On the nationalism point, Noel, America's a big country with lots of industry, particularly in Eastern America and over on the coast in the west. But this project's located in Nevada, very close to a highway, on roads, very close to the highway. It's only 300 kilometers from the new US Strategic Mineral Reserve that's been built in Hawthorne, Nevada. So, the proximity to where the US are going to store a lot of their strategic minerals going forward is certainly well noted for this as a project going forward. It's not in the middle of boondocks and nowhere.
And the amount of money America is throwing at these things at the moment is just phenomenal as well. So if you look at Australia, we've been obviously dealing with the critical minerals reserve and how that goes with from a rare earths point of view, and they're talking 1.2 billion. But you go to America and their Project Vault, which is their reserve, is $12 billion, so 10 times the amount. You've got money coming out of the Department of War, Department of Finance, Department of Economics. They've all got tens of hundreds of millions of dollars to try and get new projects and new in-country sources actually up and running. So the thematic for us is to go into America, leverage that, help them be self-sufficient going forward, and then we all win. And there's been a few other companies, Australian companies, that have gone into Nevada. And when we were over there in February as well, the opportunity that you see, especially in Nevada, is fantastic. So Nevada's #1 on the Fraser Institute of Geological Attractiveness. Western Australia dropped to 17th at one stage. It's come back up to 6th, but Nevada's still #1 or #2. So the attractiveness to go into those areas is good. And the interesting thing in America, when you think about Australia with the ASX and that we've got lots of junior explorers and that's what we're really good at doing. In America, there's a big gap in the middle there. There's a whole heap of private guys trying to fund exploration privately, but you need to be a $1 billion company and you can then go onto the NASDAQ or onto the US stock exchange there. So there's a big gap there that Australians are now going in and starting to fill from an exploration point of view because we can bring money from Australia, we can bring our expertise, we get it up to a certain stage, and then America generally takes it over themselves in terms of goes onto a NASDAQ or something like that in terms of a listing. So VKA, Black Bear, who else was there? A couple of others around, but multiple Australian juniors that have gone in there, and they're now 300, 400 and 1,000% up on what they were, and becoming billion-dollar companies. So Tavan was a billion-dollar company recently. They've fallen back in Australia, but we're a $20 million company, and I think we've got plenty of upside.
I think
Darren?
they're still around $700 million, Tavan.
Yeah.
Yeah, we've got plenty of upside.
Yeah.
I mean, that's an interesting aspect and a very important aspect of the whole business of OD6 or OD6-like companies is the marketability of what you guys are doing. So from an investor point of view, obviously, I mean, technically everything looks grand and everything else, but what's the capital market feeling? Obviously, you guys need to raise money. You have raised money, and you spoke about creating value as you go over there, and I think the dynamics of having the Australians going there with that kind of thinking. You mentioned on the private funding, which is what they used to do. Now they're getting a bit more attention. What's the word on that side of things?
So we're lucky that we raised $3.4 million just recently. So we've got all that in the bank. We've had a whole heap of our prices spiked up quite high, but still low comparatively to anyone else. So huge amount of upside there. Look, people have asked us, are we going to do an OTC listing? And people might know not know what that is, but it's for over-the-counter listing where brokers in America swap it. So it's like a smaller ASX version or all those type of things. There's all those opportunities for us to obviously grow in Australia and both our market cap here, but also then go into America and try and grow that whole arrangement there. From a capital funding point of view, you'll see there's plenty of money in America from state and federal government grants, so we can look to leverage those. We have recently brought on Julie Bishop as well as a strategic advisor for us. So the ex-Deputy Prime Minister of Australia, Foreign Minister, lots of really good deep experience into Washington themselves, and we're looking to leverage all of those type of arrangements as well. So obviously we've got to get a resource on there, we've got to get through the whole process. America also has the ability now to do fast tracking of permits and approvals, which they call Fast 41. So there's a whole heap of things that we'll look to leverage and look to leverage the financial markets at the same time. One other point as well is America is 100% import reliant. There's a small vein-hosted Flourspar deposit in America run by Aries. So they're more artisanal mining. They haven't been able to put a resource on it, but they're mining it. They've just got up to $250 million contract with the US Department of War to supply Flourspar over 5 years. So it just shows you how much money there potentially is. They're looking at producing 20,000 tonnes this year and increasing that maybe next year. But for us, we see to be economic for anyone, you need to be that 100,000 tonnes per annum plus.
Mate, you should guys just do the Asian way. Get a tractor, get a truck, start digging.
That's right. We've spoken about it. We've still got to get permits and everything else. But what we do see, especially from Aries, is there's been some investor hesitance with them. They're still a couple of $100 million market cap, but they've been investor hesitance to say, well, what's your resource and what's your mine life?
One thing Australia's done very well with mining is doing it right. And we have one of the great mining expertise in the world in Western Australia, embodied by people like Brett that have built mines before. And it's about not going in and thinking like a prospector or an artisanal miner and thinking like, how is this going to be of benefit to the shareholders and the investors and the community in the country over a period of time. And that's by not stuffing it up. So I want to make sure we get things right in this process.
Before we go on and talk about the other aspects of the project, I just want to touch on your last announcement that you guys did when you talk about that 8-kilometre corridor. Do you want to walk us through that announcement?
Yeah, so this is another thing that with Australian exploration expertise that we can help apply into the US and these projects in the US. So we took some hyperspectral information from satellite and also an airborne survey that was conducted in the area. Hyperspectral can tell you about the different clay minerals that are associated with epithermal alteration. And what that showed us is we're dealing with an 8-kilometre system, not these few hundred meters of Flourspar occurrences, but an 8-kilometer system that lines up sort of north-northeast to south-southwest, with mineral occurrences all along it, but there's a considerably large amount of epithermal alteration. Immediately to the south of the Horseshoe deposit, we have an area that we call the Dress Circle, which is a large, like 700,000 square meter zone of phyllic alteration in that. And then between Horseshoe and North Horseshoe and onto the Jumbo prospects that we've come up with through the airborne Avarice system, a zone of pyrophyllite, allanite, dickite, fengite. These are minerals that are associated with potentially caps and lithocaps above the main productive parts of an epithermal system. So the thought that our replacement style ore body on a relatively flat-lying limestone bed that's been replaced with Flourspar then continues as a stratigraphic bed, and we're seeing the response of that at the surface. So can we actually start to join up some of these occurrences and start to turn this into something that is globally significant? And I think that's a real possibility.
Next, investors put out something on the summary just to try and dumb it down for everyone, but effectively what you're seeing is little icebergs sticking out the top of the sides of the hills at the moment, and hopefully there's a big iceberg that sits below that is yet to be discovered. And maybe it's worth talking about the lithocap as well, Darren, just in terms of one of the attractiveness on what it was and why we think it's an epithermal deposit.
Yeah, so geologists, we use this term lithocap quite a bit, and it's basically a lithocap in simple terms is like a hot spring terrace. If you've ever been to New Zealand and seen the hot springs in action, you'll see these silica terraces at surface, all steam coming out of them and those kind of things, and they're often stripped of any interesting minerals, but they become these silica rich zones that are become very hard. So once the hot springs and everything cool down, as happened here 30 million years ago, everything cooled down, these become quite resistive, so they can outcrop. So they're sought after by exploration geologists because they can be hiding something significant underneath. So we've got Dress Circle at 700,000 square meter zone to the south, but we also have this identified lithocap with pyrophyllite and argillic alteration minerals like allanite on it, identified from the hyperspectral work, and that particular lithocap is mapped out over about 70,000 square meters, and the jumbo occurrences are sitting at the base, on the side of the hill, at the base of that lithocap. So that lithocap obscures the target area, but it's only 20 to 40 meters thick. So the thought that we can drill through the lithocap and hit this replacement band underneath it that links jumbo to North Horseshoe and then potentially all the way through to the Horseshoe deposit.
And if you start timesing out some of those sizes that Darren's mentioning in terms of 70 to 700 square metres, and then you go 1 metre of thickness or 10 metres of thickness of a potential Flourspar underneath it, the numbers start getting big very quickly, and that's where the economics really kick in from a mine point of view going forward.
I think one of the things that, as I'm listening to you talking there, it's kind of like promising in the sense, I don't know whether time will tell when you guys do your exploration, is, you know, I'm a big believer of mineral systems, and a big enriched mineral system are the ones that starts popping up epithermal deposits or a porphyry type deposit or a skarn style. If you look at your atypical mineral system schematic diagram, they'll pop up. It just depends on where you are on the map in terms of where things are. I mean, to get an enriched Flourspar deposit means you've got to have enough guts in the system to produce that, and one wonders whether there is enough guts in the core of the fluids to build this and that, and hence my question is, you know, what are the possibilities of other styles of mineralization or other type of mineralization, naming other commodities in the system? Because if it's rich enough to give you that kind of Flourspar, is it rich enough to pop up other things?
Well, I think the short answer to that is absolutely, of course, because we're in Nevada. And Nevada is one of the great gold provinces and copper provinces. There's some very large copper mines in Nevada, as well as silver, of course. If you take Carlin-style systems, hundreds of millions of ounces on the Battle Mountain Eureka Cortez Trend and the Carlin Trend, which are located to the north of us, they were only really discovered in the 60s. But they are hosted in carbonates, the same stratigraphy. The Pogonip limestones and the Simonson dolomites are key parts of the stratigraphy in those systems, and they're a variant of an epithermal system. Then of course we have Round Mountain at plus 10 million ounces, owned by Kinross, which is a sort of a true low sulfidation epithermal system off to the west from us. The age of our host rocks and the age of the epithermal event are all very similar to this, well, the tertiary events that occurred across Nevada. So there hasn't been a lot of historic gold exploration on our 10 million claim areas, but it's certainly not something that we're going to ignore going forward. And things like lithocaps, argillic alteration, phyllic alteration, pyrophilites, acidic fluids, these are all terms that your epithermal gold or your porphyry copper gold exploration geologists would relish to see those kind of scale of systems on here. So it's a case of, yes, we are focused on Flourspar, but we're not going to ignore, and we're going to make sure that we test all the things on this project going forward. So we'll let the market know if we start getting some assay results that do relate to all the metals on here.
You know, as you mentioned, spill up all those terminologies that I hear, but I can never remember because, you know, it's exactly what you just described, epithermal, porphyritic kind of geology, it rings bells, but look,
Round Mountain has got Flourspar in it, and Round Mountain is a plus 10 million ounce deposit. The new Anglo Gold, recent Anglo Gold discoveries down in the Beatty mining district to the southwest of where we are, there was a Flourspar mine for about 20 years back in the 1920s and 30s, and now it's a plus 10 million ounce discovery at the Merlin deposit that they have there. So, you know, Flourspar sits intrinsically linked with these other kinds of mineral systems that we have in the area. So I think that we certainly have the potential, and whether that we can eventuate that potential depends on how good we are.
I think Climax, which is a big molybdenum mine, has a lot of Flourspar too, and it is quite a well, call it byproduct of this kind of system. So
one of the issues with byproduct for Flourspar is that you often do get the contaminants in there, the lead, zinc, moly, copper, and those kind of things that the Flourspar or the fluorite consumers don't want to have. So you want a nice clean Flourspar, and then someone nearby a gold or base metals discovery that's on that, which is what we certainly our Flourspar. You know, it's because we're dealing with such high grades, is looking like it's going to be pretty good.
Well, yeah, I mean, if those grades become economical, it does blend itself to the fact that you got a, you know, sort of enriched system, and what that becomes is anyone's guess. Only time will tell, I guess, and the amount of money you guys raise to do the work. Yeah. So,
I suppose the key on raising the money. They're not big systems, so they're not massive drilling costs. And cost in America, we were talking off air before as well. Cost in America is relatively cheap compared to Australia. Australia's just got expensive on labour. Obviously fuel prices are up because of the war, but everything's got really expensive in Australia and hard to do, whereas in the US it's still lots of people. When we were over there, the fuel was cheap still. I think it cost us $30 or $40 just to fill up a tank of petrol. So when you start looking at the cost profiles that you might have in the US versus Australia, you become very competitive very quickly.
Yeah, well, $30, $40 fuel up a car is really cheap compared to what we're filling up now. But look, we could go on. But what's next? Like for the market, if the guy's saying, "Oh, this fantastic story," I'm no longer sitting on the fence, or I'm sitting on the fence. What's next?
So we're still in due diligence period. So we've got a 120-day due diligence period, which can be extended. We've already been over there. Darren's about to head back over there post-Easter. So from our first visit over there, there's a whole heap of rock chip samples and channel samples that we took whilst we were over there. Those results will hopefully be available shortly. So that's all coming. We're looking at what do we do with the existing claims. We've just expanded those claims. Is there ability to add a hub and spoke model where we might have a central area around Mammoth and Horseshoe, and then adding on other Flourspar deposits around that can then feed into to get scale and everything else that we might need. There's permitting approval pathways. Then we can start looking at what Julie Bishop will be doing with us, which is how do we leverage into Washington? How do we leverage a lot of those grants, offtake agreements, even debt providing from US government banks and other things. So we've got a series of really good announcements to keep on coming through there from a geological perspective, but we're also now working on how do we actually build something and how do we build it quickly.
Darren, any last words out there from the technical point of view that we missed?
scale and grade, right? They're the keys to making economic deposits. And your earlier question was a really good one about, you know, what happens if there's another major discovery or something in the world. Well, scale and grade are the two factors that come into play, and we believe that we have both those. So if it ends up being a more competitive fluorspar market, those projects with the highest grades were the ones that would win. And we often say in gold or in iron ore or anywhere, grade is king, and they're the ones that can really make a lot of money in positive cycles. But also can continue through as mines in the cyclical nature of the industry. So I think that the Quinn Fluorspar projects have both scale and grade, as we've announced in the public domain.
Look, fantastic. I think it's great discussion, and I hope we can keep going and follow the story. And I'm guessing we're only going to get more and more news to come out from you guys.
Yeah. I think it's a location job from a property analogy. We're in the right location in Nevada, we're in the right location in terms of the US, where they are onshoring as much as they can. They're building out new gigafactories and chip factories and all those type of things, so we're going to be right in the middle of it, and there's lots of money being thrown around by Trump to make America great again. We can only help.
Well, he might not be so happy with you, Darren. You just told him that the Australians do things better than them, so I don't know, you might have to.
America has built a lot of very, very good mines around the world. You know, we have a good technological. We're sitting here at UWA today. We're strong in geology. We're strong in big picture thinking as well. And I've been busy over the last month reading all the papers I can on carbonate stratigraphy of Nevada and structural and tectonic evolution to keep on trying to understand how we're going to, or what we need to know, what we don't know yet and what we need to know in order to turn this into something interesting.
Okay, fantastic. And till next time, thanks guys.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you, Noel.